Every single one of us are a leader in some way. We may not all have some position or some title or whatever it might be, but we all are leading people. We're leading people that we meet every day to some kind of conclusion. And leadership, I believe, as Maxwell puts it, is just influence. Leadership is influence. And though you may not be using it right now, you could. And I'm going to talk to you about what influence is, as well as the philosophy or really the foundation of leadership and what's behind it and what you would need to know if you wanted to be a good leader. And I've been involved in the church, been involved in the workplace. I've been a project manager. I've been a supervisor. I've been the trash carrier. And that's kind of how I started that whole, career when I was in it. In contracting, I was the lowest guy on a totem pole. And when I left that job, I left as a project manager of multiple sites, multiple millions of dollars of equipment, profits, budgets, all that kind of stuff. A lot of those things crossed over into my leadership philosophy. So that's what we're going to talk about today on the For Real Life and Godliness podcast, the podcast that takes the Word of God and brings it down into the grit and dirt of your real life, where you can actually use it. We'll be right back after this. All right, so this is episode 2 of season 2. I told you I'd be back and I'd do my best to be consistent with this, so we're gonna go ahead and be consistent with it. And today, as I said, we're going to kick off a series. Not 100% sure how many parts this will be, but this is kind of an introduction to my philosophy of leadership, and I hope it's something that you'll be able to use as well. And as I said, way back when, in 2010, I believe it was, so about 15 years ago now, I came on to work at a company in the first coast of Florida called Florida Certified Contractors. And when I came on there, I had to kind of fight to get the job. The boss at the time was just not 100% sold on me because I was just a young guy in Bible college. And I'm sure his thoughts were, this dude ain't gonna be able to do anything. And partially, when I came on board, he was right. And there was a moment in the first couple of weeks of reckoning, I guess, between him and I, and he called me out. And it was probably one of the first times that I've ever really been called out. And as I said, I was just a trash carrier, just a helper. I'm the guy who's doing all the stuff the main guy didn't want to do, kind of thing. And there was a certain incident that happened. I didn't take initiative. I was trying to be lazy. I wasn't coming in like I should come in. And he pretty much said, look, if you don't come in when you're supposed to every single day, you aren't going to work here. You're fired. And essentially, he pretty much said I was fired no matter what. I was just fired. But I came back, I apologized, and I said, I will get under any house. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Just don't can me. And he held me to it. And it was the first time, I think, in my life, unfortunately, that I was really held accountable for my actions. My attitude really was probably the biggest problem. And unfortunately, in the church, we have confused kindness and that kind of that Christian attitude with what the world might call nice or niceness, if that's a word. To be nice to people is to be kind to them, or to be nice to people is to kind of let things slide. Like in the church, somehow we're just supposed to let things go by that need to be taken care of. And we sweep it under the rug becomes the default response to problems and issues and conflicts. And I was allowed basically to live in that kind of illusion for a while in my life as a teenager growing up and even in the church. But here in the real world, as we like to talk about here, I was called to the carpet, or called on the carpet, however that saying goes. I'm not 100% sure. But you know what I mean. I was called to give account of my attitude and given real world consequences for being lazy and just, downright stupid, really. I don't know any more sensitive way to put that, but I was not doing what I should be doing. I was not acting like I should be acting. I didn't have that grit. I didn't have that determination. And it needed to be instilled in me, and I got a crash course in what happens if you don't just take what's given to you and do what you can with it. And that would be the number one thing as far as growing in maturity towards being a leader, I would say, has to be part of your life. It's the grit that requires you, and it has to be internal. And it must have been in me somewhere, but it was buried under a lot of laziness. And my boss said, you better find where it is, or you won't be working here anymore. And I needed it. I mean, I'd moved 2 states away from home to go to this Bible Institute, and I had to pay my own way, and I didn't have any, no help, no money, no funds, no nothing. Just there was nothing. And so it was up to me. If I was going to survive, I needed that job. And if I was going to pursue what God had given me to do, it was reliant on me keeping that job. And the real world consequences of me slacking for those first couple weeks or not showing up on time or like I was supposed to, that would have cost me basically my ministry today, because I would not have been able to continue in school, which led me to my first ministry position, which led me to, 15 years later, where I am today. As you see, each piece along the way is important, and it has to start with character, and my character was, at the time, flawed. And my boss would have none of it. But you have to take responsibility for whatever is given to you. And so you must take what's given to you and do whatever you can with it, even if you're not skilled yet, even if you don't know it. But you have to have that quality about you that no matter what comes down that road, I'm going to take it head on. If you know, I got this shirt on today from my other channel, White Bison Outdoors, and it's an outdoors channel. It does mainly right now fishing videos on it, but I do fishing, hiking, off-road, those kind of things. And that's like my hobby. My hobby is getting outside and having fun. I like take the girls out with me as much as I can, and don't really have my off-road rig right now, but I'm working on that, and hopefully I'll have one of those here shortly again, because it's been quite a while since I had a good rig. Built quite a few over the last decade and a half or so, and looking forward to get back into that. Anyways, one of the qualities of the Bison, though, which is why it kind of, grabbed my attention and why I used it for that channel and its like mascot, I guess, if you want to call it that, is how tough they are, how resilient they are, and how even over years of them almost becoming extinct, they came back and they still survived, and they went through the trial by fire essentially and survived. But in their own element, regardless of what externals were attacking them, in their own element, they are a tough animal. And a quality about them, a characteristic about them, is that they're one of the few animals that will turn into the storm, the winter storms that come out west in the Midwest and that come there and cover them with snow. They will actually turn into it and actually walk into the storm to shorten, at least this is what I've read and been told, it's basically in order to shorten the duration of the storm, because if you walk towards the wind, towards the storm, you're basically running to meet it as it's running to meet you. And that's what their mindset is. They take the storm head on. And that's what you have to do. And that's one of the very basic ideas of leadership, is that you must have the quality, the grit to get in and take head on whatever you're given, especially before you become a leader. Because most people want to be, number one, they want to sit in the chair in the truck and be the manager or the leader or the pastor or the owner or the whatever. And very few people have I met in my life who are willing to be the trash carrier. They're willing to be the janitor or the bottom floor, the guy who's not, recognized, the dude in the background. And the principle in Scripture is to take the lower seat. Most people, the reason why their leadership fails is because they were never either required or would never choose to take the lower seat. And Jesus uses that principle there. He says, if you go to a banquet, don't fight for the high seats like these guys do, like these Pharisees do. He says, take the lower seat. And he kind of interesting to me. I'm not 100% sure exactly why he would go about explaining it this way, but he uses our egos as a reason, essentially, because he says, it would be embarrassing, essentially, if you read through the story, for you to be sitting in a high seat and be told, hey, go back down there, and you would have shame because of that. But it's better for you to be sitting low and be called up, and then you'll have in the presence of those there and have praise, which is strange because that's a very human idea. But I think the principle is that, when you come in the bottom and you're just there to fill your seat, to do what you're called to do, what you're supposed to do with what you're given, as I started this principle with, and you just take on what's given to you with the attitude that I'm going to do this little thing to the best of my ability, with excellence, right? With excellence. Excellence has been a center theme in my life, and it's even one of the core values here at Trinity. I think it's the number one value is excellence, and excellence must be a desire internally within you that regardless of where you are in your life and what you've been given, that you take things head on and you just do them. In fact, another principle in Scripture, and I wish I had listed these out, but they kind of flow into my mind as I'm thinking. But the other quote from Jesus is that he that is faithful in least is faithful in much. Unjust in least, unjust in much. And you can extend that. Who's lazy in the least will be lazy in the abundance or whatever he's given. Those who cannot lead themselves when they're in the lower seat, in the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak, will not be good leaders if put into that position. And unfortunately, especially within our churches, we have quite a few people who do not belong in the seats that they sit in, but they've been given to them for whatever reason, politics and family name and whatever else it might be, and they couldn't lead, as my dad says, a 3-man rush to a 2-door outhouse. So I don't know where that saying ever came from, but he would say it a lot. They couldn't manage a 3-man rush to a 2-hole outhouse, and they're not able. And I don't know if it's because they lack leadership ability as much as they lack leadership humility. And a leader must be humble. He cannot be someone who's there to use his position as a means to promote himself, to keep others down, to oppress, essentially. I mean, Proverbs is full of the principles of the oppressor versus those who are not, and the poor versus the rich, and the better is a poor man with his integrity than a rich man who's evil, and better, don't, what does it say? It says, don't envy the oppressor, don't want to do any of his ways, don't, feel like you need to act like him because he seems to have what you want, and you think, well, he got it through oppression, that's how I should do it. And it says, don't give in to that, live with integrity. And those who chase riches, and try and get them quickly will fall into sin, but he who tills his own ground will have plenty of bread. And they're all over the place, all the way through Proverbs. This idea that, you just trust the process, essentially, and allow God to move in his time. And whatever place you are, you take that on, head on, like the bison. You take it head on and do whatever you can with it. If you're not willing to just do whatever you can with what you're given, then you'll never be given any more, which is another principle from the New Testament. To him who has, more shall be given, and to him who doesn't have, what he does have will be taken away. And that's two sides to that. If you're not willing to do what you can with the little least bit, you obviously won't be given anything, and in fact will actually lose. And we see that in this life. We see people who are unsuccessful, and they throw out all kinds of reasons of why they can't seem to ever succeed. But the reality is, if they were to be honest with themselves, they're just not willing to do what it takes. They're not willing to show humility, maybe. They're not willing to take the lower seat, or they're not just ready to take personal responsibility. And that's the second thing, and that's kind of interwoven with that. But personal responsibility, in my opinion, is one of the most lacking qualities in this generation or the last couple generations. Everybody wants to blame somebody else for the place they hold in life. and everything's someone else's problem. I was acquainted with a certain person. I won't go into who it was or how they're connected to me, but they could never keep a job. They over and over and over again, they just got fired or they left or they quit. And all their life, even to this day, they are still walking down that road. They're still repeating that cycle. And they're just nowhere in life. They're about my age, maybe a little bit younger than me. And they had at the time a family, a wife and a kid. And he could never hold a job. And every time I would talk to him about it, he would tell me how bad the boss was, or this other guy was, or how hard the work was, or how he wasn't going to take that, is what he would say more often than not. I'm not going to take that from somebody. I don't need this in my life. And my only thought was, buddy, you got a wife and kids, you have to take it. You take whatever is given to you and you do what you can with it until you don't have to anymore. It's not to say you should sit under somebody who's abusive all your life, but sometimes you must take, I don't know how to say this without saying things I ought not say, but you have to take, the ground level dirt floor sometimes and sweep it, even though it'll never get clean, until you can step up into the next level. You have to learn the bare minimums. And as I had to learn that from a trash carrier up to a project manager, I put that into practice in my own life. And this guy would not. And today, I stand where I stand, he stands where he stands. He has lost his family, more or less. I have mine by the grace of God. And we stand apart, not because of anything in me specifically, except for the one difference that I had to learn from my boss, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that you either take what you're given and do what you can with it, or you won't have anything. You will lose your job. What you do have, you will lose, like the biblical principle says. And you see this pattern over and over again in real life. The Bible, all those principles, I've mentioned about 3 or 4 passages. Maybe when I edit this, I will put them down at the bottom so if you watch the YouTube video version of this, you can see it, or maybe I'll put it in the notes so you can see where those principles are coming from. But over and over again, you see this idea of from the smallest to the least. Even in the exhortation of Jesus that the first shall be last, the last shall be first, you see this inversion of how the world sees things. They want to be on top, and so they think, I just need to climb up there. But reality is, you need to start at the bottom, and in humility and with the willingness to learn and to do whatever it takes to not stay on the bottom, right? And I don't mean whatever it takes isn't like, cutthroat kind of stuff. I mean within yourself. It's always you. You can't do anything about anybody else. You can only change you. And so you work hard. And if your boss is someone you shouldn't be under, then just work hard there until you gain experience enough to get to another place and a better place. And if you do that long enough, you will find that you have created a value within yourself that attracts the right kind of employers. But it starts not with them or even your need. As Jim Rohn says, life doesn't respond to need. It responds to deserve. And he meant you deserve what you get. You deserve what you work for. You deserve the investments you put in or the lack thereof. Everybody gets what they deserve essentially at the end of the day, for the most part, when it comes to normal life. Now, there obviously are cases where very bad things happen, people lying and deceit and stuff like that. And I've had some of that in my own life with an employer of mine who, not the first guy. The first guy was great. And like I said, I learned almost everything I know about leadership from him, or at least from experience in that company. But there was another company I moved to, and I had to leave there because the man continued to change my wages, kind of like Jacob told Laban in the Old Testament. He kept changing how the payment structure was. Every time you would get near his little bonus level where you would actually make major money, he would be like, oh, well, we're actually going to extend that. And, by the end of it, it was more work, less money, and not what he promised from the beginning of the year. And me and a couple other guys had to leave that place. But even in that, I did everything I could to stay there as long as I could. And once it became obvious that it would never change, I moved from that to something else. And sometimes you do have to do that. Some people just will not be honest or honorable people. But that's nothing to do with you. You can only deal with you. You can be honorable, you can work hard, you can add to yourself. And in that case, what I had to do was actually learn an entirely new skill. I had to learn something that I'd never done before and go through a whole different process. And I got into a whole different business that I'd never had any experience in order to survive those years. And when I came to the end of it, I got a better job. Even though I hated what I was trying to do, but I had to do it to make ends meet. And as I said in the beginning, that quality of taking what you're given and doing the best you can with it is required in stewards, I believe, as Paul says. You know, it's required in stewards to be found faithful. And if you take that back to Jesus' parables of the stewards, the one guy who had little and just hid it in the earth and said, well, you know, this isn't a lot. It's not as much as the guy who had 2 or the guy who had 4, so I'm just going to hide mine and give it back to him at the end of the day. You know, he is severely reprimanded for being lazy and slothful because he didn't take the little thing and at least double it like everybody else did. He had the same opportunity. Just because they had more money didn't mean that they had less opportunity. He had 1, the other dude had 2, the other guy had 4. Some people have better talents than you, or there will be people, and there will be, who have better opportunities. There are people born into families with more money, people born into names with more clout, people who have come through more orthodox channels. Like my life has been extremely unorthodox, how I've gone through school, how I came into ministry, and all these things. Like my life is not written down anywhere. It is a very unorthodox journey so far, which I'm fine with because I'm pretty unorthodox, but as far as my methods go. But none of those things have anything to do with you. A leader at the beginning must have the grit to take what's given to him and do whatever he can, and then move on into personal responsibility, because that's where it starts, taking what you're given, doing what you can with it. And then, but it's not enough simply to do what you can as far as in the work. You must also expand yourself. No one's going to teach you for free. No one's going to do things for you that you could obviously do for yourself. You try to get people to invest in you, and you try to learn and glean as you hear people speak, and you take the lessons online. I mean, YouTube has 1,000 people who can teach you pretty much anything you want to know. And though you may not have the hands-on experience, at least gives you an idea. And there are piles and piles of resources online today, some free, some you have to pay for. But if you're not willing to invest in yourself, to grow past your current ability, why would you expect anybody to give you anything? We have to be willing to grow, and that's personal responsibility. It's on me to grow so that I can lead better, I can move farther, I can achieve those things that will allow me to improve the state of my family and move them farther. Especially as a man, as a husband, as the provider, protector, you have to do that. You have to. Or if you're a single mom, or maybe it's you and your husband and you're working together because, you know, maybe the economy's not great or you're just in that situation, both of you, it's the same thing. Everybody has this level of responsibility they must overcome and improve on. And each level of responsibility requires you to not just take it, but also to improve on it so you can move farther. And that's where people stop. People stop wherever the responsibility becomes comfortable. And real leaders, true leaders, are always going to push through plateaus in whatever way they possibly can. And the more plateaus that you push through, the better able you are to lead others. Just like 2 Corinthians tells us that we're given experiences and sufferings that we may be able to help others in their sufferings. A leader must go through quite a bit of suffering and quite a bit of loss and quite a bit of trials so that he's able, when people come to him and he's leading them, to say, look, I know where you've been, or at least, man, I understand that I don't understand, which is also part of it. but you are improving and you're always going through these things and you're growing. And as you grow, you can help others grow. As you lead more, the more you can lead. But it will always stop, and you'll have a cap on your leadership ability wherever you find it most comfortable to sit. If you're not willing to go through problems and problem solve and have issues, your leadership ability will be capped pretty low. If you're willing and you have the grit to accept the storm and turn into it and to make progress into the storm, you'll find the storm to be shorter, and you will find yourself in a better place than everybody else who either ran the other way, which actually lengthens the storm, or just kind of hunkered down and sat. They might be okay, but they're not going to be as far as you are. And that's the parable of the bison, as it were. But each of these things must be taken. So number one, I guess really it all is personal responsibility. But personal responsibility starts with the idea that you must take whatever is given to you and make do with it as best as you can. And let me just throw this in here since I decided to go and look it up. Matthew 25:20. It says, "He who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents, and I gained 5 talents beside them. I've doubled your money. I not only took the responsibility to hold, I improved upon what you gave me." He was not content with what he was given, but he wanted to make it better. And that is an essential part of all leadership, is not only to take what's given, but to improve it. As a leader, you're there to improve, in some senses, the experience, the lives of the people who you are leading. You are leading them up, I hope. I hope you're not leading people lower, because who wants to follow a leader who does that? You want to be leading people upward. You want to make their lives better, even if people go beyond you. And that's, as you get older, especially as you find your natural cap, which is farther than your mental one is today. But you will find, obviously, all of us have a certain amount of gifting, and our talents will cap out somewhere. And we may have someone under us who will go beyond us. But that should be a joy for us. Like, man, he's going beyond me. And we should be leading people upward. And in this guy and his talents, he not only took the responsibility of keeping the talents safe, but he expanded them. And obviously his Lord said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over," again, there's this principle, "few things. I will make you ruler over many things." And notice he says, "You are faithful as a servant or steward over what was not even yours." But notice the payoff is not that he's going to be a servant still. It says that you are going to be a ruler over many things. And so he wasn't satisfied with status quo, just simply keeping the talents, but he expanded them, and the Lord rewards his faithfulness as a lower seat, bottom totem pole servant, and rewards him with becoming a leader. Same thing happens with the guy with the 2 talents. And then the bottom guy says, "I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, here's yours. Take it." And the guy looks at him and says, "Man, you wicked and lazy servant." He says, you ought to have taken my money, deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I could have received what I'd given you with interest. He says, I expected you to take the responsibility and move forward. Yes, you were given the least, but you could have done something with it. And he says, you are wicked and lazy. And man, I, for one, do not want that to be said about me or my leadership, ever. Like, I don't ever want to be seen as wicked or lazy. And today, I hope, a little bit, you learned what it means to pursue leadership. Because in each of these things, regardless if you're only leading your own life or your family, you must do these things if you want to succeed. Nobody succeeds without personal responsibility and the drive to do better, regardless of what state you start in. You must take the little or the most. If you have great, and notice that if you have been given great opportunities and great potential just naturally by family or name or biological talents or whatever it might be, you are going to be required to do more with that. But all of us are required to do what we can with what we're given. And every leader knows that it starts at home with me, with my attitude of humility, wanting to learn, grit to progress, turning into the storm, making progress regardless of how difficult it is until we find greener pastures and we find a place where we can thrive, which is really the end goal. And not only us, but as the bison walks, all of them follow the lead bison through that, and he has improved not only his own state, but the smaller cows and the other bison who follow him through the storm. And if they get where the snow's so deep, the front bison is cutting the way, and the other ones in this long trail of bison will be cutting through the snow, but everybody behind them, each progressively has an easier path because of the ones in front. But the leader, the one in front, must cut through the deepest, the most difficult snow to lead his, I don't know, it's not flock, herd, I guess, his herd of bison. There's probably some random word for herd of bison, but I need to learn that. But he is leading his herd, his family, those behind him to greener pastures, past the storm, through the difficulties. So a leader is not only concerned with improving his own state and status, but also of those who he leads. That's what it takes to be a good leader. And that is the end of today's podcast, Season 2, Episode 2 of the For Real Life and Godliness podcast. Now, if you enjoyed this today, share it with somebody else, because if it helped you, it'll probably help someone else. You can watch this on YouTube. You can listen to it on Spotify and on Apple, wherever you are right now. And if you've listened to them on one, go watch it on YouTube. If you're listening to it, go watch it. If you're watching it, go listen to it. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe, like, share it. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, go ahead and rate us highly. If you don't like what I said today, don't rate me poorly. Just tell me face to face, and I'll improve it if it needs to be improved. But until next time, we love you guys, and see you later.